Okay, Algebra 1, this is 1.2, Order of Operations. And order of operations, hopefully everybody remembers what order of operations are. You know, you're adding, you're subtracting, you're multiplying, you're dividing, all of those things. And there are a few different steps that we're going to want to take here. And so the first one is to evaluate expressions. So evaluate expressions inside grouping symbols. That's the first one. The second one is evaluate all powers. The third one is multiply and or divide from left to right. And the last step, number 4, is add and or subtract from left to right. So remember, everything is going from left to right, and there's only 4 steps. Now, if you remember back to possibly before this class, you probably would have learned an acronym. Something that helped you remember the words or the order that you should be doing your order of operations in. Does anybody remember that? Pemdas. Yes. So, yes, it's Pemdas. They always used to say, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." So, Pemdas helps us remember that you're dealing with parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. So that first letter in there, and I should have used a different color, is Pemdas. And that helps us remember our orders. But wait a minute, there's 2, 4, 6 of these, but only 4 steps. So if you think about what the steps were saying, the first step was take care of any grouping symbols. Well, grouping symbols are parentheses. So what they did was saying, hey, that first step is still parentheses. You got to take care of those. And then in step number 2, it said take care of any exponents. Okay, so exponents are again its own step. These are things you have to do first. Then in step 3, it says multiply and or divide. Think of multiplication and division. Multiplication and division technically can be the same. You can multiply by something by 2, or you can divide by a half. Because if you divide by a fraction, you have to flip and multiply anyways. You can multiply something by 1/3 or divide it by 3. Those are all the same thing. So there are ways to turn all multiplications into division and divisions into multiplication. So what they did was they grouped, or they set that aside and said multiplying and dividing can be done together. Now notice it's always left to right. You can do them at the same time. And then we can do the same thing for adding and subtracting. That's why you get 4 steps versus 6 different operations that you have to do. So you should not have to go through and do multiplications first, and then go back and do your divisions, and then go back and do your addition and then subtraction. You can kind of chunk things into little pieces, and we're going to do that in a second to make it happen. This is our first example, 16 minus 8 divided by 2 squared plus 14. So when we do this problem, you're going to go back to your list. You can either go back to Pemdas, or you can go back to the list of 4, which is a slight modification, remember, and start going through the checklist. First thing you should look for are there parentheses, grouping symbols. See any? I don't see any. So that means I go to exponents. Are there any exponents? Yes. Yes, there are exponents. There's an exponent here. So that makes this not 2 squared, but 2 squared is what? 4. Guess what? I am going to rewrite everything that did not change. And this is what you have to do. I'll change that to a 4, but notice nothing else has changed. It's very important that you bring everything else along for the ride. Now there are no more exponents. Now we can go to multiply or divide. Is there a multiplication or division going on? Yes. We have that right here. So I would not do 16 minus 8 because we have an 8 divided by 4 in the middle. What's 8 divided by 4? What's our negative 8 divided by 4? What is that? It's negative 2, or minus 2, and then plus 14 at the end. Now we have addition and subtraction only. That is step number 4. And then that point, you always work from left to right. So then you can do 16 minus 2 first, which is 14. Add 14 to it, and you get 28. Okay, so this particular problem has grouping symbols. I have a bracket and a set of parentheses. They mean the exact same thing, which basically means work from the inside out. Now, so this outside bracket, they like to use something different than a parentheses, because when you have a parentheses with a parentheses with a parentheses and a parentheses, it starts getting really messy. So we try to not make it messy by changing it up if we can. And so what we need to do is work on the inside stuff first. Notice it also has an exponent. But because they are added inside, and it's a grouping symbol, and I can do that addition, I'm going to do that first. So what's 2 plus 3? So it's 5. So I got, look, I'm not going to change any of this stuff except for I made it a 5. The inside of the set of parentheses is a 5, which now has this exponent on it, which means I do what? Not multiply it. Square. What's 5 squared? It's 25. Notice that there's a negative outside. Normally when I square a number, it becomes positive. But this negative here is out front. It's saying it's minus 5 squared. And 5 squared is 25, so it's going to be minus 25. End my bracket. Now you have to ask yourself, what's 32 minus 25? 7. So it's 6 times 7, which is 42. So let's evaluate 3x squared plus the quantity 2y plus z to the third power, and your parentheses. If x equals 4, y equals 5, and z equals 3. So on this one, we are going to do what first? So the first thing we will do is sub in. And when I go to sub in, look what I'm going to do. I'm creating, that's a larger set of parentheses, and then there's a smaller one. I'm creating holes. I'm taking out the x, y, and z, and I will go back now. I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to fill them in with the values that are supposed to be. This is supposed to be x. X is 4. The next blank was a y, and y was worth 5, and z was 3. So, working my order of operations, I've got several grouping symbols. But if you really think about it, you don't need some of them. Like the one around the 5. It's just 5. Not needed. Plus 3 to the third power. Now the 3 and the 4 both have exponents on them, so kind of makes sense. Maybe you want to keep those grouping symbols there, maybe not. So at that point, it doesn't matter which one you do because you have to do both, and they're both exponents. So I'm going to work from left to right and work those out. So this becomes 3 times, what's 4 squared? 16. Plus, I'm going to leave the 2 out front. I'm going to get rid of those parentheses on the 5. They're not needed, but I'm not changing 5. Plus 3 squared. Or 3 to the third power, sorry.
27.
It is 27. So, this is where you have options. There's different things going on at different times. If I look over here, there's a plus sign. This plus sign is separating this group from this group. And that means that they can be at 2 different places, and it means I can do different things at different times. Because I know, no matter what, I got a set of parentheses that I can clear up over here. But I also have some multiplication over here, and they don't affect each other, at least yet, because multiplication and grouping symbols come well before an addition or subtraction symbol. Those are like the last things you do. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to clean this up, and I'm going to go over here and clean the inside of the parentheses up on my next move at the same time. 3 times 16. What is 3 times 16? 16, 32, which makes then 48. Plus, notice, the 2 still stays, and 5 plus 27. Plus 5 plus 27. 32. And then what comes first, the adding or the multiplication? Multiplication. What's 2 times 32? 64. Just realized I made a mistake, and nothing was said yet, but this 2 is supposed to be on the y. So that would have been 10 inside here, not 2 times this whole entire quantity. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up here, and I am going to erase it out and move it to the outside. If I move it to the outside, move that on yours to the outside, and now everything is going to be fine on your way down. Okay? And what is 64 plus 48? Well, 4 plus 8 is a 2, carry the 1. 112? Does everybody else got?